Good afternoon and welcome to the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery CDBG-DR Multifamily Housing Program DR-MHP NOFA workshop. Today's workshop will be presented by Joe Harney, our DR Multifamily Housing Branch Manager. I'm Clint Whited, Program Consultant, joined by Lori Baker, Program Consultant, and Gabrielle Navarro from HCD's Asset Management and Compliance Unit. Additional DR-MHP staff on the call today include Emily Burgos, our section manager, Maria Rouse, our program manager, Chris Chen, Jamie Knack, Nien Nguyen, and Maggie Silver, housing program representatives too.
Clint, real quick, before we get into housekeeping, I believe there's currently 3 attendees, though I do seem to recall that the attendees list was a little longer than that, so maybe we should give a few people a few more minutes to come into the thing, as well as I see someone's Otter AI note taker is in the chat, so we're going to need to remove the AI note taker as it's against HCD policy to allow for AI notes. However, the webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website with our 508 remediation completed and available for those interested. All right. And Chris, can you confirm if we have any more in the waiting lobby?
There are no more people in the lobby.
Very good. All right then, Clint, if you'd be so kind.
Certainly. Once again, welcome to the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Multifamily Housing Program NOFA workshop, presented today by Joe Harney, Clint Whited, Lori Baker, Gabriella Navarro, and also joined by DR-MHP staff, including Emily Burgos, our section manager, Maria Rouse, our program manager, Chris Chen, Jamie Knack, and Nien Nguyen, as well as Maggie Silver, all HCD program representatives too. Some quick housekeeping items at the beginning of today's webinar. All attendees will be muted for the duration of the webinar. You may submit questions through the Q&A box. You will also submit questions to drmhp@hcd.ca.gov. That is our email inbox. We will compile a list of answers to all questions in an FAQ document to be posted after the webinar. We will post a recording of this webinar to our webpage at a later date. Any capitalized terms that appear on the slides are defined in the program policies and procedures that are on our website, and our webpage is at the URL shown on screen. And for more on the Disaster Recovery Multifamily Housing Program 2023-2024 NOFA program overview, I'll turn the presentation over to Joe Harney, Branch Manager.
Thank you, Clint. So the DR-MHP program is authorized pursuant to the State of California's CDBG Disaster Recovery Action Plan for the 2023-2024 disasters that was approved by HUD on June 2nd, 2025 to address the presidentially declared flood disaster DR 4699, which occurred between February and July of 2023, and DR 4758, January of 2024. The program under the action plan is designed to provide low-interest loans for new construction of affordable multifamily rental housing. At this time, $137.8 million is being made available in this NOFA in 4 separate geographical set-asides. Application deadlines for this NOFA will conclude on November 21st, 2025 at 4 p.m. For further questions on the overview of this NOFA, please contact the DR team at dr-mhp@hcd.ca.gov. Next slide, please. So this is our tribal focused workshop. And this session is intended for a tribal entity seeking to build on Native American land in the eligible counties. If you do not fulfill both of these criteria, please refer to our previous general entity workshop that was conducted yesterday, September 23rd, 2025, and that webinar and its contents, which will be posted to our website. This program does not require a limited waiver of sovereign immunity for a tribal entity to participate in this program. And in addition, any tribal entity is eligible to submit AB 1010 waiver requests to the department if state financing requirements would create an unnecessary administrative burden. For more on the AB 1010 waiver process, please refer to our DRM MHP policy section 5.4. So for the purposes of our program, we are defining a tribal entity to include one of the following. An Indian tribe that meets the definition of a tribe pursuant to section 25 USC 5304E, or a tribally designated housing entity, a THDE, as defined at 25 USC section 4103, that meets the definition of tribal organization pursuant to that's section 5304, or an Indian tribe located in California that is either of the following: listed on the Bureau of Indian Affairs official Office of Federal Acknowledgement petitioners list pursuant to CFR section 83.1, or listed on the contact list maintained by the California Native American Heritage Commission for the purposes of consultation pursuant to California Government Code section 65352.3, and has formed and controls a special purpose entity in compliance with the Uniform Multifamily Regulation section 8313.2. For the purposes of our DRMHP NOFA, the definition of Native American lands is defined as real property located within the state of California that meets the following criteria. The property must be located within the geographic boundary of the state of California, that is trust land for which the United States hold title to the tract or interest in trust for the benefit of one or more Indian tribes or individual Indians, or is restricted Indian land for which one or more tribe or individual holds fee title to the tract or interest, but can alienate or encumber it only with the approval of the United States, and the land may be leased for housing development and residential purposes under federal law. Secondly, all land located in Indian country as defined by 18 USC 1151, or all land within the limits of a rancheria under the jurisdiction of the United States government. So to describe the most impacted and distressed areas in the geographic set-asides, we will continue onwards. So a project that is to be considered for this NOFA must be in one or more of the most impacted and distressed areas, also known as a MID. Proposed projects for 4699 and 4758 consists of these 6 MID counties: San Benito, Tuolumne, Tulare, San Diego, Monterey, and Santa Cruz. So based off of the unmet needs analysis performed by FEMA and presented in our CDBG Disaster Recovery Action Plan, we have made funding available in these 4 geographic set-asides. So the first geographic set aside includes the 3 counties of San Benito, Tuolumne, and Tulare, and that $20.6 million is being made available for projects in those 3 counties. The next county is San Diego with a allocation of $27.5 million. Monterey County at $41.3 million, and Santa Cruz County with $48.2. I will note that here Humboldt County is not listed, as the Hoopa Valley tribe, which has received a separate set aside for the DR 4707 and is a non-competitive award being made to the Hoopa Valley tribe for their specific disaster recovery needs. As noted, geographical set-asides will be competitive, and applicants will compete for funds regionally based on the location of their projects. The geographic set-asides will only be funded to the extent that eligible applications exist, meeting all threshold requirements, including minimum point scores. If the department receives fewer eligible applications than funding available in a geographic set-aside region, any unawarded funds within may be used to fund remaining eligible applications in other regions. Hazard mitigation is required in this NOFA. Pursuant to the Federal Registrar Notice and California government codes, applications must describe how hazard mitigation measures will be incorporated into the project to reduce the impact of recurring natural disasters. DR-MHP projects are required to incorporate mitigation measures and features into the design of multifamily units pursuant to Section 3.1 of the DR-MHP policy. And for program requirements, I will turn the presentation back to Clint Whited, our program consultant.
Thank you so much, Joe. Let's verify. Okay. Eligible projects. So projects that are eligible under this NOFA include new construction of multifamily rental housing only, which includes scattered site projects. Eligible projects must be located in the geographical set-aside areas previously described by Joe back on slide 8. Moving into threshold requirements. Proposed projects must fulfill all of the requirements on the following slides. Any application which does not meet the threshold will be ineligible to receive a CDBG-DR MHP award. At the time of application, the sponsor shall demonstrate site control in accordance with the Uniform Multifamily Regulation 8303. For projects that are developed on Native American land and where site control is a ground lease, the lease agreement between the tribal entity and the project owner may be for a time period less than what is required in the Uniform Multifamily Regulation, but must be for a period of not less than 50 years. The project must not have closed on construction funding or already started construction. The project must demonstrate the ability to start construction within 180 calendar days of the DR-MHP award. THDEs must have a letter providing prior notification to the local tribal governing body pursuant to Health and Safety Code section 50675.7E. Applications must also include a letter or resolution of support for the proposed project from the local tribal governing body where the proposed project is located. The project application must demonstrate that the project ties back to the disaster by increasing the supply of affordable housing units in a most impacted and distressed area. The project must include at least 5 total units, including scattered site projects. The project must have a minimum of 5 affordable units, or 51% of the units in the project must be affordable units, whichever is greater. CDBG-DR funds are limited to low to moderate income housing units. Proposed projects may have a fixed income units, but may have mixed income units, but CDBG-DR funds must only be applied to the affordable units to be occupied by low and moderate income households. All sources of funding required to complete the project must be identified, including the status of funds, whether they've been applied for and pending a decision, if you're applying for funds, or if the funds have been secured and are already committed to the project. Project costs must be reasonable, which is what a reasonable person would pay in the same or similar circumstances for the same or similar item of services. The program acknowledges that construction costs are oftentimes higher on Native American land, and that this is accounted for within the definition of cost reasonableness. Projects must conform to the construction standards set forth in Section 3.1 of the DRMHP policy where applicable. Projects must comply with all federal requirements set forth in Section 3.4 of the DRMHP policy. And project applications must receive a minimum point score of 88 points based on the universal scoring criteria set forth in Section 4.3 of the DRMHP policy and Section 4 of the NOFA. The proposed project must be documented in the application to address the following affordable rent requirements and tenant income limits over the duration of the required affordability period. At a minimum, the following thresholds must be adhered to in all project applications. The number and type of proposed DRMHP assisted units that will be leased to tenants with an income of up to 65% of the area median income based on regulatory and program requirements. Proposed projects should include at least 10% of the proposed DRMHP assisted units for households with income not exceeding 30% of area median income. Affordable rents will be determined by using the Multifamily Tax Subsidy Projects, or MTSP, regular income rent limits published annually by HCD for the jurisdiction where the project is located. Projects shall be restricted by a recorded regulatory agreement for a minimum affordability period of 58 years, except that a proposed project to be developed on Native American land with site control as a ground lease shall be so restricted for a period not less than 50 years. Now we'll move into program funding amounts, terms, and limits. The disaster recovery maximum per unit loan limit, Part 1. Awards of CDBG-DR funds shall not exceed the lesser of the demonstrated need or the MHP maximum per unit loan limit in effect at the time of application in accordance with the DRMHP policy section 2.3.2. This table shows the maximum subsidy available based on the unit bedroom size. So for example, for a 0-bedroom unit, the maximum subsidy for that unit is $211,116, whereas for a 1-bedroom, it's $242,012. For a 2-bedroom, it's $294,295. For a 3-bedroom, it's $380,722. And for a 4-bedroom unit, it would be $417,911 per unit. As a sample, the CDBG-DR maximum loan amount in a project with 101 units, of which 100 units are affordable and all are subsidized by DRMHP, of which 50 are 1-bedroom, 25 are 2-bedroom, and 25 are 3-bedroom, the table illustrates the maximum total subsidy from DRMHP funds that may be awarded. So in this example, there are 51 bedroom units multiplied by $242,012 yields a subsidy of $12,100,600. And the same for the 25 2-bedroom units and the 25 3-bedroom units, resulting in a total maximum DRMHP award in this example of $28,976,025. But based on the above unit mix, that $28.9 million would be the maximum award under the DRMHP maximum loan amount. However, if the demonstrated need of the project exceeds the DRMHP maximum per unit loan limit calculation that we just went over, the DRMHP loan may be sized equal to 75% of total development cost, provided that 100% of the new rental housing units are restricted as DRMHP units in accordance with our policy in section 2.4. For DRMHP loan limit calculations, The unit count may include the number of DRMHP assisted units within the project, including units with long-term, low-income, or occupancy restrictions imposed by HCD, the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee, or other public agencies, and restricted to no greater than 65% of area median income. For program funding amounts, awards of CDBG-DR funds shall not exceed the lesser of the demonstrated need or 75% of total development cost. Program funds shall be used for construction phase financing only and may not be held for use until permanent financing. Funding shall be provided in the form of a loan. The eligible uses of CDBG-DR MHP funds include the following: property acquisition costs, architectural, appraisal, engineering, environmental, legal, and other consulting costs and fees which are directly related to the planning and execution of the project and which are incurred through third-party contracts, escrow, title insurance, recording, and other related costs, building permits and state and local fees, local development impact fees, developer fees as set forth in the Uniform Multifamily Regulation, insurance and bonding, mobilization, demolition, site prep and cleanup, residential construction costs, and on-site improvements related to the project. The ineligible uses of CDBG-DR MHP funds include any costs incurred between the date of application and the environmental clearance that constitute an adverse environmental impact or that limit the choice of reasonable alternatives pursuant to 24 CFR Part 58.22A, application development costs, advances of any type, including construction, interest and financing costs, facility operating or maintenance expenses, any type of reserves, furnishings, off-site improvements, except where the improvement is contiguously adjacent to the project parcel and serves the housing, construction or any other costs related to any non-residential component of the project, and reimbursement of the sponsor's capital investment or prepaid expenses. There's a prohibition against the duplication of benefits, or DOB. Duplication of benefits occurs when a program beneficiary receives disaster assistance from multiple sources for the same recovery purpose, and the total assistance received for that purpose is more than the total need. This includes all benefits available to a person or entity for the same recovery purpose, including cash and other resources such as insurance proceeds, grants, FEMA assistance, SBA loans, other local, state, or federal program funds, and private or nonprofit organization funds. Project applications may not contain any duplication of benefits. All activities funded with CDBG-DR dollars must undergo a duplication of benefits review and calculation prior to project award and prior to project closeout. Marketing plan. DR-MHP applications, where applicable, must include a marketing plan pursuant to Section 2.14 of the DR-MHP policy. Project sponsors shall prioritize marketing to disaster-impacted households for occupancy of units. Examples of renters impacted by the disasters include renters that have lost rental units or have been displaced due to the impacts of DR 4699, DR 4707, and DR 4758. Sponsors shall also demonstrate within the marketing plan that proposed projects will increase housing options for low-income households. Assembly Bill 1010 waivers for tribal entities. Pursuant to California Health and Safety Code Section 50406P, the department may modify state financing requirements to ensure program compatibility when provisions of tribal law, tribal governance, tribal charter, or difference in tribal entity or agency legal structure would cause a violation or not satisfy the requirements of any state financing. Such modifications are sometimes referred to as AB 1010 waivers. The department may also waive state financing requirements to avoid an unnecessary administrative burden when provisions of tribal law, tribal governance, tribal charter, or difference in tribal entity legal structure or agency create minor inconsistencies with state financing requirements. Tribal entities are encouraged to submit AB 1010 waiver requests if provisions of tribal law, tribal governance, tribal charter, or difference in tribal entity or agency legal structure would cause the tribal entity to fail to satisfy any of the DR-MHP program requirements. The applicant must submit an appraisal and market study with their application pursuant to Section 2.7 of the DR-MHP policy. The applicant must submit the tenant selection criteria and processes with their application pursuant to Section 2.8 of the policy. For applications that include housing with supportive services, a supportive service plan must also be submitted with the application pursuant to Section 2.9 of the DR-MHP policy. Now we'll move into the scoring overview. Applications that pass the initial threshold review and meet all of the threshold requirements discussed earlier will be scored using the universal scoring criteria included in the NOFA. In the event of tied point scores, the department will rank tied applications based on the tiebreaker system detailed in the universal scoring criteria. Please refer to Section 4 of the NOFA for further details and a complete writing of the universal scoring criteria. Incomplete applications or others not expected to receive an award of funds due to relatively low scores may not be fully evaluated. All applications meeting all of the threshold requirements and achieving a minimum point score of 88 points in the universal scoring criteria will be considered for funding. With respect to supportive service costs included within an application for special needs projects, the department's Notice of Omnibus Program Guideline Amendments or Supportive Service Cost Limits, Administrative Notice 24-05, dated October 7, 2024, and may subsequently be amended, provides operating funds to hire high-quality, skilled supportive service staff. The Policy and Administrative Notice 24-05 supersedes the Uniform Multifamily Regulation 8314E and F that allowed supportive service costs as eligible operating expenses within a project's operating budget within prescribed limits. The limits that are included in the Administrative Notice 24-05, or as may subsequently be amended, shall be observed. At this time, I'll pass the presentation to my colleague, Lori Baker, who will go over application submission and review procedures. Lori?
Thank you, Clint. Next slide. So I'll go over the application submission process. Applications must meet eligibility requirements as previously described and threshold slides upon submission. Applications that do not meet the filing deadline requirements will not be eligible for funding. Applications must be on forms provided by HCD, which cannot be altered or modified by the applicant. It is the applicant's responsibility to ensure the application is clear, complete, accurate, and timely. Excel forms must be submitted in Excel format, not in a PDF format. Application materials must be submitted electronically via eCivis Grants Network's solicitation portal. Requirements for uploading the DR-MHP application workbook and required supporting documentation, including naming conventions, are described in the DR-MHP application instructions page. Applicants must upload all application materials to the solicitation portal. It's important to note that the information provided in the application will become public record, available for review by the public pursuant to the California Public Records Act. Any materials provided are subject to disclosure to any person making a records request under this act. HCD cautions applicants to use discretion in providing information not specifically requested, including but not limited to bank account numbers, personal phone numbers, and home addresses. Providing this information to HCD, the applicant is waiving any claim of confidentiality and consents to the disclosure of submitted material upon request. Prior awards. If applicants seeking to substitute previously awarded funds, including but not limited to substitutions to increase the amount of an award, must first reject their previous award in writing prior to submitting their DR MHP application and provide a reasonable written justification that the substitution is necessary to ensure project feasibility. For projects proposing a reduction to the AMI levels on the unit mix, the awardee must engage with program staff of their prior award and confirm the change does not impact project feasibility and would not cause a reduction in awarded funds pursuant to that program's requirements. Next slide. Again, with substitutions, this consultation with department program staff is required before any substitution will be permitted. Substitutions based solely on sponsor, applicant preference, or convenience of the funding source will not be permitted. It is allowable for applicants that wish to retain their previous award to apply for funds available within this DR MHP NOFA, so long as the previous award is unmodified. The department will also allow previously awarded projects to lower their proposed income targets from one application to the next, so long as the total unit count remains the same. The department will restrict units to the lowest targeting across all awarded funds and will require projects awarded from a program with prioritized target populations to maintain the special population units, that is increasing target population and our restricted units is permitted. So just to clarify, you're required to maintain the special population units, but you may also increase them. The consultation process must begin no later than October 24th, 2025. So with your application under this NOFA, the department will review the information provided in the application and score the application accordingly. However, if there is significant departure from the application, the department may reevaluate the project score, reduce the loan or grant amount, or assign negative points to the sponsor applicant. This is Clint's slide. I'll turn it over to you, Clint.
Thanks so much, Lori. Next, we'll discuss the universal scoring criteria. Within the universal scoring criteria, we will be scoring applications based on 6 different categories. First is the extent to which projects serve households at the lowest income levels with a maximum possible score of 30 points. Then state policy priorities with a maximum score of 20 points. Project sponsor and property management experience with a maximum total score of 20 points. Project readiness with a maximum possible score of 27 points. Infill, proximity to amenities and efficient building methods with a maximum possible score of 15 points. Finally, cost containment with a maximum possible score of 5 points. The total possible universal points that may be scored in an application is 117 points. The proposed project must receive at least 88 points to be considered for an award. And now we'll cover scoring criteria 1, which is the extent to which the project serves households at the lowest income levels. In this category, there's a maximum of 30 points. Applications will be scored based on the percentage of restricted units limited to various percentages of area median income adjusted by household size. Each percent of AMI category may be used only once. To receive any points in this category, at least 10% of the restricted units must be restricted to households with incomes not exceeding 30% of AMI. This is the lowest income points table. Across the columns, it shows the percent of area median income category, ranging from 65% all the way down to 20% or below. And then it shows the percentage of restricted units within the project's unit mix that meet a particular AMI target. So for example, if 10% of the units within the project application unit mix were targeted at 50% of AMI, that would result in a score of 2.5 points. As an example, the percentage of restricted units using that table at each income level must be rounded to the nearest whole percentage point. So for example, if you end up with a set of units restricted at 50% of AMI and it ends up being 29.7% of units, we'll round that up to 30%. This table shows the percentage of restricted units at a particular percentage of AMI and the points that are earned. So in a hypothetical project, if 10% of the units were restricted at 30% of AMI, that project would receive 7.5 points. In addition, 15% of the units in the project are restricted at 40% of AMI. That will also result in an additional 7.5 points. Then 50% of the project units are restricted at 50% of AMI, scoring 12.5 points based on the table. And then 25% of the project's units are restricted at 65% of AMI, resulting in a score of 3.15 points. The total points scored by this application's unit mix and income targeting is 30.65 points. The category total is a maximum of 30 points. So in this scenario, the sample application shown in this table would score a perfect 30 points in this scoring criteria 1. Our deeply affordable units policy. Deeply affordable units are defined as units with income up to 30% of area median income. Those units cannot be concentrated among a project's smaller units and must be distributed proportionally across all of the unit sizes, or alternately, more heavily represented among larger units. To ensure a proportional spread of the deeply affordable units, at least 10% of the larger units in a project must also be provided at 30% of AMI as applicable. So long as the applicant meets the 10% standard project-wide, the 10% standard need not be met among all of the smaller units in the project. So this is a sample deeply affordable unit calculation, and it shows the distribution of 6 deeply targeted units at 30% of AMI or below across the project unit mix. In this sample, there are 60 total units in the project, comprised of 18 3-bedroom, 21 2-bedroom, and 21 1-bedroom units. In a 60-unit project, 10% of the units are required to be deeply targeted. And in this case, you would restrict 2 units among the 3-bedroom units, 2 units among the 2-bedroom units, and 2 units among the 1-bedroom unit to comply with the policy. Next, we'll move on to the second scoring criterion, state policy priorities, and I'll pass the presentation back to my colleague, Lori Baker.
Thank you, Clint. Okay, criterion 2 overview. There's a maximum of 20 points available from below categories. 5 points will be provided to projects located in a high resource or highest resource area, as shown on the TCAC HCD opportunity map. 10 points will be awarded to projects with DR MHP units serving special needs populations, and 5 points for projects that are located on public access lands. Regarding projects in the HCD TCAC opportunity area map, 5 points will be awarded to projects located in those areas. Once projects receiving 5 points pursuant to this criterion have been ranked and recommended for an award in the amount of 50% of all program funds available in a region, remaining projects shall not receive 5 points for meeting the requirements of this criterion. Opportunity maps can be found in the slide deck, which will be posted on the webpage. So points for serving special needs populations. DR MHP funded special needs units as a percent of total units are shown in this chart. So if 25% or more of the DR MHP units are special needs units, then that will score 10 points. Similarly, 9 points will be provided for projects that have 16 to 24% special needs units, and 8 points for 10 to 15% of the units. A project with 50 total units, of which 36 are DR MHP funded units, of which 9 are DR MHP funded special needs units, would receive 9 points under this criterion. That's 9 divided by 50 equals 18%. Special needs does not include seniors or veterans unless they otherwise qualify as special needs population as required by other statutory laws. Special needs populations are defined as one or more of the following groups who need supportive services to maintain and stabilize their housing: individuals with disabilities, individuals at risk of homelessness or are experiencing homelessness or experiencing chronic homelessness, individuals with substance use disorders, frequent users of public health or mental health services, individuals who are fleeing domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking, homeless youth, families in the child welfare system for whom the absence of housing is a barrier to family reunification, individuals exiting from institutional settings or at risk of placement in an institutional setting, older adults in need of supportive services, or other special groups with unique housing needs as determined by the department. Public access lands, there's a maximum of 5 points. New construction on a site designated as excess land under Executive Order N-06-19 or any land declared surplus by a local agency. For state-owned excess land, the project must be located on a site selected under the executive order to enter into a ground lease with the state to create affordable housing on excess state-owned property. For surplus land owned by a local agency, including transit agencies, land and donations made in fee title must be supported by a transfer agreement and demonstrated written conformance with the Surplus Land Act. Land and donations made as a low-cost, long-term lease must be supported by written conformance with the Surplus Land Act and a post-negotiation notice and proposed disposition summary. Scoring criteria 3 includes project sponsor applicant and property management experience. There's a maximum of 20 points for these 3 criteria. Development and ownership experience, maximum of 15 points. Property management experience, maximum 5 points. And negative points are variable. We'll cover each of these in the next slides. Development and ownership experience, maximum 15 points. Applications will be scored based on the number of subsidized rental housing projects, including projects funded with low-income housing tax credits or LIHTC, that the sponsor applicant has completed and operated. Sponsor applicant may include the experience of its controlled affiliated entities or its principals, but not the experience of non-management board members. Sponsor applicant may include the experience of a partner to gain experience points. The experienced partner must have a controlling interest in the project's ownership and a substantial and continued role in the project's ongoing operations. Experience among partners shall not be aggregated. Any change in ownership that reduces the sponsor applicant's role shall require prior written approval by the department. It's continued with the Development and ownership experience, the project must demonstrate the following. Projects for which points are required to have maintained fiscal integrity for the year in which each rental housing development's last financial statement has been prepared. Positive operating cash flow from typical rental residential income alone, and have funded reserves in accordance with the partnership agreement and other applicable loan documents. Certification must be submitted with respect to the last full year of ownership by the sponsor applicant, along with verification of the number of years that the project was owned by that sponsor applicant. To obtain points for projects previously owned, the ending date of ownership or participation must be no more than 10 years from the application deadline. Next slide. Development and ownership experience with affordable housing projects. So this choice shows the number of years projects are in service and the relative points assigned. The projects, one to two projects in service more than 3 years, at least one of which is department regulated or utilizes low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC, will receive five points. For 3 to 4 projects in service more than 3 years, of which one has been in service for more than 5 years and 2 are department regulated or are tax credit projects allocated by TCAC. This will be awarded 10 points. And 15 points will be awarded when there are 5 or more projects in service more than 3 years, of which one has been in service more than 5 years and 2 are department regulated or have low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC. Next slide, please. I don't know if you can all hear me, but I see it seems to be that the slides are, okay, slides have progressed. The developer shall have 3 or more years experience serving the target populations proposed to be served in the application. For example, one special needs project serving the same target populations as the proposed project in service more than 3 years will receive 5 points. 2 to 3 special needs projects serving the same target populations as the proposed project in service more than 3 years, of which one has been in service more than 3 years, and one is department regulated or utilizes low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC, will receive 10 points. And 15 points will be awarded when there are 4 or more special needs projects serving the same target populations as the proposed project in service more than 3 years, of which one is department regulated or utilizes low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC. Tribal entities and management experience. To obtain development and ownership experience points, tribal entities may contract with a developer who will not be the project owner and may receive points commensurate with the developer's experience pursuant to the previous slide. If the projects for which the entity requests experience points do not include 2 department regulated projects in service more than 3 years, the tribal entity shall also contract with a bona fide management company, which itself earns a minimum total of 5 property management experience points at the time of application. Tribal entities exercising this option to contract with a developer for these experience points shall also contract for asset management for at least the term of the 15-year federal compliance period with an entity that has provided 3 years of asset management for at least 2 department regulated projects. Property management company experience, maximum 5 points. To obtain points for projects previously managed, the ending date of the property management role must be no more than 10 years from the application deadline. Property management experience with a project shall not predate the project's construction completion date. So this chart demonstrates the points awarded under each years of experience in project management company experience points. So for example, 1 project managed over 3 years will receive 1 point. 2 to 4 projects managed over 3 years, of which 1 shall be department regulated or utilizes low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC, will receive 2 points. 5 to 7 projects managed over 3 years, of which 1 shall be department regulated or utilizing tax credits, 3 points. 8 to 10 projects managed over 3 years, of which 2 shall be department regulated or utilizes tax credits, 4 points. 11 or more projects managed over 3 years, of which 2 shall be department regulated or utilizes tax credits, 5 points. For special needs projects, points are available as described above or as follows. 4 or more special needs projects serving the same target populations as the proposed project in service more than 3 years, of which 1 shall be department regulated or a project utilizing low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC will receive 5 points. Applicants with fewer than 4 active rental housing developments in service more than 3 years shall contract with a bona fide management company, which itself earns a minimum total of 5 property management experience points at the time of the application. Sponsor applicant or property co-managed entity must obtain training in project operations, on-site certification training in federal fair housing law, and manager certification. Experienced property management agent or an equally experienced substitute must remain for a period of at least 3 years from the construction completion date, or for ownership transfers, 3 years from the sale or transfer date, to allow for at least 1 HCD monitoring visit. Experienced property manager may transfer responsibilities to the remaining general partner or property management firm following formal written approval from HCD. Now I'll turn it over to Gabriella to discuss negative points.
Thank you, Lori. My name is Gabriella Navarro, and I'm with our Asset Management and Compliance, and I will be discussing the slides on negative points today. Per HCD's negative points policy, an application will be assessed negative points based on performance penalties assessed pursuant to the department's negative points policy, which was last amended on April 3rd, 2023. If the sponsor, applicant, or the property management company is subject to a negative points assessment or is determined to be ineligible for funding, HCD shall notify them in writing in the initial point score letter. Now here's an example of negative points. So if a project earns 15 points under development and ownership experience and 5 points under property management company experience, but is assessed 3 negative points, the final score for this criterion would be 17. So you'd be looking at the 15 plus the 5 and then the deduction of the 3 to get to the 17. If the sponsor applicant is subject to a negative points assessment, HCD will provide an opportunity to appeal a negative points assessment pursuant to the appeals process as set forth in the NOFA. Your organization may consult the Asset Management and Compliance branch at compliance verification at hcd.ca.gov to ensure your portfolio is in compliance. Please do so no later than October 3rd, 2025. Thank you. I'll be handing it back over to Lori Baker for project readiness.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go over criterion 4. There's a maximum of 27 points, 10 points for financing commitments, 15 points for local and environmental approvals, 2 points for organizational documents. Points will be awarded to projects under each of the following rating factors as documented in the application and as indicated in the following slides. If a particular rating factor is not applicable, full points will be awarded in that category. Financing commitments, maximum 10 points. 5 points will be awarded for evidencing enforceable funding commitments for all construction financing. Excludes tax-exempt bonds and low-income housing tax credits. However, for projects with bond financing, lender commitment of bond financing is required for these points. 5 points will be awarded for evidence of enforceable funding commitments for all permanent financing. Includes all grants, project-based rental assistance, and operating subsidies. For projects with bond financing, any applicable permanent lender commitment of bond financing is required for these points. Enforceable funding commitments are demonstrated by the following. A letter stating that the funds have been awarded to the project. The department may approve other evidence that the assistance will be reliably available. Contingencies and commitment documents based upon the receipt of an allocation of tax-exempt bonds, 4% tax credits, or 9% tax credits will not disqualify a source from being counted as committed. To receive points for deferred payment financing, grant funds, or subsidies from other department programs, these funds must be awarded prior to finalizing the preliminary point scoring of applications under the DR MHP NOFA. Land use approvals, maximum 10 points for one of the following. 10 points for obtaining all land use approvals or entitlements necessary prior to issuing of a building permit, including any required discretionary approvals. Project sites where the planning department confirms eligibility for streamlined ministerial approval are eligible for these points. 5 points for submission of a complete application to the relevant local authorities for land use approvals under a non-discretionary local approval process, where the application has been neither approved or disapproved. 1 point for a letter signed by a planner certified by the American Institute Certified Planners, indicating that, in their opinion, the project meets all of the requirements for approval under a non-discretionary local approval process, where an application has not been approved or disapproved by the local authorities. Environmental approvals, maximum 5 points. Points will be awarded for submission of a local certification of California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, exemption or completion and submission of a complete draft environmental assessment with source documentation, a complete draft of National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, categorically excluded, subject to 58.5 review with source documentation, or assigned authority to use grant funds, or AUGF, from HUD or other appropriate federal agency supported with the underlying environmental review document and source documentation. Note that the project must have all documented environmental review clearances prior to the construction loan closing. Organizational documents, maximum 2 points. If the ultimate borrowing entity, including all affiliated entities, is fully formed and all required organizational documents are submitted with the application, that those projects will receive 2 points. We'll go into scoring criteria on number 5, infill, proximity to amenities, and efficient building materials. There's a maximum 15 points, and applications will receive 5 points for each of the following: infill development and net density, proximity to amenities, and efficient building materials. We'll cover each of these in the following slides. Infill development and net density, maximum 5 points. The project must meet one of the following requirements. Infill site where 75% previously improved, 75% adjoining parcels with urban uses, or at least 50% previously improved and at least 50% adjoining parcels with urban uses. Net density, developed at average residential net densities on the parcels to be developed that are greater than the densities described below. For an incorporated city with a non-metropolitan county, within a non-metropolitan county, and for a non-metropolitan county that has a micropolitan area, sites allowing at least 20 units per acre. For an unincorporated area in a non-metropolitan county not included in the above bullet, sites allowing at least 15 units per acre. For a suburban jurisdiction, sites allowing at least 25 units per acre. For a jurisdiction in a metropolitan county, sites allowing at least 45 units per acre. For a rural area, sites allowing at least 15 units per acre. Proximity to amenities, maximum 5 points. 1/3 point per site amenity point that would be awarded under TCAC regulations, Title IV, or successor regulation. Note that in TCAC regulations, this is a 15-point category. Achieving all 15 points under TCAC translates to 5 points under the DR MHP. Transit points must be for a transit station or major transit stop, and a distance must be measured by a walkable route. Efficient building methods, maximum 5 points for fulfilling any combination of the following: regional transportation and a transportation plan, greater than 50% of land area in a transit priority area, near electrification and total electrification. Maximum 2.5 points will be awarded if the project supports the implementation of a regional planning and transportation plan that has been determined by the California Air Resources Board to achieve regional and state land use and transportation goals. Must be demonstrated by a letter or resolution executed by an officer or an equivalent representative from the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Regional Transportation Agency, Planning, or Local Transportation Commission. A maximum 2.5 points for projects supporting a regional plan that includes policies and programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Must be demonstrated by a letter or resolution executed by an officer of or an equivalent representative from the Metropolitan Planning Organization or Regional Transportation Planning Agency or Local Transportation Commission. Transit priority area, maximum 2.5 points for projects where not less than 50% of the land area is within a transit priority area. That also must be demonstrated by a letter or resolution executed by an officer of or equivalent representative from the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Regional Transportation Planning Agency, or Local Transportation Commission. Near electrification conditions, maximum 3 points for projects that achieve near electrification. 2 out of 3 of the major energy appliances, cook stove, space heating, water heating, are electric. Projects must be wired to be electric ready, defined as having 240 volts outlets near each gas appliance. And projects with total electrification conditions will receive a maximum of 5 points for projects that are powered entirely through electricity with no connections to natural gas infrastructure. I'll turn it back over to Clint.
Thanks so much, Lori. Next, we'll cover scoring criterion 6, cost containment. The cost containment formula, a maximum of 5 points. A project shall receive 1 point for each full percent that the project's eligible basis is less than the project's adjusted threshold basis limit, up to a maximum of 5 points. The percentage is calculated by dividing the project's eligible basis by the project's adjusted threshold basis limit. See Section 4G of the NOFA for additional details. Next, we'll cover tiebreakers. In the event of tied point scores, the department shall rank tied applications based on 3 factors, which will be implemented in sequence. First, the lowest weighted average affordability of all residential units, followed by leverage of other funds, and finally, additional cost containment. If after review of the first factor, the applications remain tied, the second factor shall be calculated. If after review of the second factor, the applications remain tied, the third factor shall be calculated. Note that the DR-MHP application workbook is designed to automatically calculate the tiebreaker score for the project. For more information, please see Section 4H of the NOFA. Next, we'll cover appeals. Applicants may appeal HCD's written determination that an application is incomplete, has failed threshold review, or has otherwise been determined to provide an insufficient basis for an award. At the sole discretion of the department's written determination may include a request for clarifying and/or corrective information. No applicant shall have the right to appeal a decision of the department relating to another applicant's application. Any request to appeal the department's decision shall be reviewed for compliance with the DR-MHP policy and this NOFA. All decisions rendered shall be made by the program manager or her designee. The decision shall be final, binding, and conclusive, and shall constitute the final action of HCD. The appeals process provided in the NOFA applies solely to decisions of HCD made pursuant to the NOFA. Applicants may submit to HCD by the deadline a written appeal which states all relevant facts, arguments, and evidence upon which the appeal is based. The applicant must provide a detailed reference to the area or areas of the application that provide clarification and substantiation for the basis of the appeal. No new or additional information will be considered if this information would result in a competitive advantage to an applicant. Once written appeal is submitted to HCD, no further information or materials will be accepted or considered thereafter. Appeals are to be submitted to HCD at dr-mhp@hcd.ca.gov according to the deadline set forth in the HCD review letters. Appeals must be received by HCD no later than 5 business days from the date of HCD's threshold review or the initial point score letter, as applicable, representing HCD's decision made in response to the application. Next, we'll cover other key requirements. First, with duplication of benefits, which again occurs when a program beneficiary receives disaster assistance from multiple sources for the same recovery purpose, and the total assistance received for that purpose is no more than the total need. It includes all benefits available to a person or entity for the same recovery purpose, including cash and other resources, such as insurance proceeds, grants, FEMA assistance, SBA loans, other local, state, or federal program funds, and private or nonprofit organization funds. All activities funded with CDBG-DR dollars must undergo a DOB review prior to project award and a DOB certification prior to project closeout. The project application must document that all funds obtained from any source from the date of the disaster until the date of the application. HCD also reserves the right to perform additional duplication of benefits checks throughout the course of the project's period of performance to ensure that there is no duplicative assistance throughout the course of the project. To address any potential duplication of benefits, the standard agreement will include provisions requiring repayment of any assistance later received for the same purpose as the CDBG-DR funds. The California Preservation Notice Law. All applicants, sponsors, co-sponsors, owners, and special purpose entities, where applicable, must at all times comply with and not be in violation of California's Preservation Notice Law pursuant to Government Code Sections 65863.10, 11, and 13. Uniform Relocation Assistance, or URA. All projects must comply with the federal URA and all state and local relocation assistance rules and regulations. If a project results in displacement of persons, businesses, or farm operations, the sponsor or applicant shall be solely responsible for providing relocation assistance. Before standard agreements from a DR-MHP award may be executed, the sponsor must have either a department-approved relocation plan or a department-issued certification regarding non-application of relocation benefits and an indemnification agreement which has been duly executed and approved by the department. This concludes the presentation slides for this webinar. We thank you all for attending today's presentation. For further questions, please enter those in the Q&A box at this time. And also, if you have questions after the webinar concludes, please feel free to reach out to our program staff at our email inbox, dr-mhp@hcd.ca.gov. Thank you for attending today.
And thank you, Clinton Loy, for that lovely presentation. As has been stated, we have available our questions and answer box. I believe there's been 2 questions answered so far. So I will leave the webinar open a few more minutes. If any of the remaining attendees have any questions they wish to ask on the slides, we can address them. Otherwise, please feel free at any time until the application deadline to submit any questions you may have to the DR-MHP inbox as identified on slide 101.